Good evening. Before we begin, a couple things. One, a special shout out to all our new viewers on Twitter. Glad to see you this evening. You're going to have a really interesting topic for you tonight in that of therapy, but we're going to get to that in a second. Let's get to the disclaimer. Before we start tonight's program, this is a reminder that this episode will address various topics related to therapy and mental health. These may be sensitive to some of our viewers. Viewer discretion, as always, is advised. We remind you to please consult your doctor, your mental health professional, your outreach group, your sponsor, or specialist before adopting any change to your dietary, physical, and/or mental health regime. If you're looking for options with respect to mental health, contact SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, at 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-4357. The service is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It has a confidential free information service for individuals and family members facing such stressors. Importantly, if you're feeling suicidal crisis or emotional distress and need to be put in touch with a crisis center, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. Or go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org. You can also text the word HOME to 741-741. Those resources are also available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And it wouldn't be a disclaimer unless I talk about something that has been near and dear to this heart for the last 15, 16 months, but quite frankly, the last 11 years. The National MS Society is a collective of passionate individuals who want to do something about MS now, to move together towards a world free of multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is comprised of unpredictable and often disabling flare-ups of the central nervous system. Such flare-ups disrupt the flow of information within the brain and between the brain and the body. The National MS Society is the largest private funder of MS researchers in the world, investing more than $1 billion to date. MS stops people from moving, but the National MS Society exists to make sure that MS doesn't. To contact the National MS Society, please call 1-800-344-4867. Once again, 1-800-344-4867. Or go to their website at nationalmssociety.org. Also, as I did last year, I will be taking part in the Walk MS 2022 in Media, Pennsylvania on April 23rd. We are raising money for this and the National MS Society through A Venture to a Cure's fundraising page at rebrand.ly/A Venture to a Cure. Again, rebrand.ly/A Venture to a Cure. Thank you for those who have donated money to this amazing organization or have even gone to the National MS Society to learn more about multiple sclerosis and demyelination. It touches me and over the 1 million people in this country who have multiple sclerosis in so many ways. And we appreciate all of you. And on that, let's begin. Good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you may be, and welcome to the Venture Forward. I am John Venturini, a recovering addict of overeating, obesity, compulsive gambling, and alcoholism, and it is an honor and pleasure to see all of you tonight on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter now, and also the rebrand.ly/adventure to a cure, the fundraising page that we have for the Walk MS 2022 in Media, Pennsylvania on April 23rd. And it's an honor and pleasure to see all of you tonight. A little bit of graphical audio issues in the beginning of the show, but that's okay. We pushed forward, didn't we? And in essence, that is a story that has been an ongoing story about this journey in the last 3 years, is pushing forward. But one of the ways we push forward is through therapy and through becoming better acquainted with ourselves, both our inner systems and our external systems. And tonight, we're going to talk about a kind of therapy that talks about that. It's not your traditional therapy as we think of other therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy and the like. Internal family systems is a specific kind of therapy that talks to issues that are very common, surprisingly. We'll talk about all of that in about 2 minutes. But let's say hello to all of you, and let's see who wins tonight's door prize. And that would be Jamie over on YouTube, who says, "Evening, everyone." Good evening, Jamie. Hope you're doing well. And we also have Stuart on YouTube, who says, "Hey, hey." And I say, "Hey, hey" to you too. It is interesting how this story began as far as me taking this specific kind of therapy. I was a sort of person that has gone for therapy in the past, various times. I think of times when I was a kid, going to a psychologist. I was thinking about the times when I lost the weight the first time and how I went to therapy, and how I was losing the weight the second time and went to therapy as well. But this third time, something clicked. And I think because I truly hit the bottoms of alcoholism, the bottoms of overeating, obesity, the bottoms of gambling, that I think the lessons were becoming resonant with me. That's the first part. The second part was when someone gives you the advice to say, "Hey, you might have tried these other things, but maybe you should try internal family systems." And you have a very comprehensive conversation about why. Why IFS? Why down that road? And it's because you find that they had the same issues that you do, and that the therapy has helped them immensely. And likewise, it has helped me immensely. So we're going to talk about that tonight. In a sense that IFS is also known as parts therapy. We kind of say IFS, parts therapy, and the like. There are other kinds of therapy types that kind of mimic IFS. But for the sake of tonight's conversation, we will be talking about internal family systems. Now, before we begin, I want to be fully adamant in this, and I'll be very clear about this a couple more times tonight. I am not a therapist. I, however, went to plenty of therapy with IFS therapists and have many therapists as friends who have kind of guided me down the road as far as the benefits of why IFS is a very important kind of therapy. So that said, if you have any questions about IFS, definitely go to psychologytoday.com or go to SAMHSA, and we can bring that graphic back up once more. The phone number for SAMHSA, again, is 1-800-662-4357. Again, 1-800-662-HELP. You can go to samhsa.gov. So before we get into this conversation, one more shameless plug, not very much a shameless plug, but a very important plug, if you will, about the Walk MS 2022 over in media. Doing this again on April 23rd. I did it last year. It was a virtual event last year. This year we get to walk in person, and it's going to be an incredible time walking with others. A 3-mile walk in Media, Pennsylvania, but it's for an incredibly good cause. And if you're interested in learning more about the Walk MS Media 2022, go to the website that is listed below. That is rebrand.ly/adventure to a cure. Once again, rebrand.ly/adventure to a cure. In order to get any sort of semblance of why tonight's conversation is important, we should go to The Language of Letting Go, which is one of the most influential books as far as codependency out there. It is a daily hymnal or daily reading of different things from Melody Beattie, an incredibly great author. And I think when I've gone through this journey, the words and pages in this book have resonated to me and others. That's why we kind of make it a practice to go over some of the readings on this show now. That said, let's talk about those old feelings, as that is today's entry in The Language of Letting Go for April 7th. Quote, I still have bad days, but that's okay. I used to have bad years. Unquote. Anonymous. Sometimes the old feelings creep back in. We may feel fearful, ashamed, and hopeless. We may feel not good enough, unlovable, victimized, helpless, and resentful about it all. This is codependency, a condition some describe as soul sickness. Many of us felt this way when we began recovery. Sometimes we slip back into those feelings after we've begun recovery. Sometimes there's a reason. An event may trigger these reactions, such as ending a relationship, stress, problems on the job, at home, or in friendships. Times of change can trigger these reactions. So can physical illness. Sometimes these feelings return for no reason. A return to the old feelings doesn't mean we're back to square one in our recovery. They do not mean we failed at recovery. They do not mean we're in for a long, painful session of feeling badly. They just are there. The solution is the same. Practicing the basics. Some of the basics are loving and trusting ourselves, detachment, dealing with feelings, giving and receiving support in the recovery community, using our affirmations, and having fun. Another basic is working the steps. Often, working the steps is how we become enabled and empowered to practice the other basics, such as detachment and self-love. If the old feelings come back, know for certain there is a way out that will work. Today, if I find myself in the dark pit of codependency, I will work a step to help climb myself out. And that is today's language of letting go. Going back to Maine for a second. If we think about some of the story that I've been dealing with, in the sense that dealt with alcoholism, dealt with overeating, obesity, dealt with compulsive gambling, dealt with this sort of laissez-faire, reckless attitude towards money, but also dealt severely with codependency, looking to people please and putting myself and shuffling things underneath the rug. If you think about what that said, it is okay to have bad days. I'm going to bring that back up for a second, in the sense that there are going to be days we're in the doldrums. And the funny thing is, it could be due to physical illness, or due to the fact that it may appear for no reason. We don't know what the trigger is. That said, there is always a way out that will work if we work the steps and we remain true to the affirmations of what we are taught as far as this program. Codependency, CODA, if you will. It's very important to realize that we have to stay true to our convictions. The love and care we have has to stay to ourselves first. We have to grow that for ourselves so then we can grow it for so many others. But the love and care and respect and honesty must resonate for ourselves first. That is first, foremost, and paramount. One quick comment popped up. Jamie says, we all have bad days for sure. And that certainly more good days than bad, but definitely the bad days pop up every now and then, and we just have to work through it. But very good point, Jamie. And Sammy joins us on YouTube, who says, hey, everyone. Sammy, good evening to you, sir. So going back to what I said in the beginning, how did I become aware of IFS? I was suffering something called drop. I think there were moments of happiness and enthralling moments that were short, and then off of that sort of excitement, got this sort of feeling of loneliness or feeling of longingness, otherwise known as drop. That was definitely a part of me that was definitely feeling this. Then there was the ongoing dilemma of travel and also remaining true to myself. Again, it's something where I travel a lot and I have to remain true to that. But traveling now in the last 3 years, especially the last 2 years before what happened in 2020, has become a lot easier. It's a lot easier for me to get from point A to point B. When you have that going for you, when you have the physical health working for you, the mental health is there as well. What does that get me? It gets me better scenery, better things to do, a better life. But in order to do that, I have to work this. I have to get honest with myself to become that. Two main facets to that. One would be obviously the physical health journey. But second is the mental health journey, and that of IFS. And Stella, we've mentioned Stella and Rebecca before on this show, Stella referred me to this kind of therapy as it greatly helped her. She gave me really good reasons on why it helped her and how the therapy just did amazing things for her. The light bulb started going off and realizing that she needed to do things for her before she did anything for anyone else. And over time, I was getting that sense too. We go through the different components of this journey, going to the time I was sitting in a hotel room in Chicago watching The Secret, and everything started basically illuminating like a light bulb, realizing that we can manifest everything, or manifest anything rather, as we talked to on the last episode. Manifesting in the power of belief is very important, but I would never have gotten into that ballpark without starting to walk down this road. So take that for what it will. Two kinds of therapy that I've heard of. CBT is something I've done before. CBT stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. It's a kind of therapy that is solution focused. It teaches specific techniques to help address symptoms that negatively impact function, right? So we talk about certain things that are affecting us. There is a sort of playbook, a certain recipe book within CBT that can help us through it. The difference is, in IFS, it's much less directive and is more solution focused. We don't talk about people as one entity. We talk about people as parts. We talk about people as parts of beliefs and whatnot that comprise us all. Because there are many different facets to us, right? And we need to treat all of them in order to treat ourself. We refer to the term self. We refer to the things that basically govern ourselves. It doesn't make any effort to change thought or teach skills to do so. That is on your own. But what you find is when you start doing IFS therapy, it becomes resonant on what can be done. You now know what the theory of the possible is. And as I mentioned before, IFS is known as parts therapy. So what is IFS? IFS basically is an integrative kind of therapy. It's psychotherapy basically created in the 1980s by an incredible doctor by the name of Richard C. Schwartz, rather. Combines thinking with the view that the mind is made up of relatively discrete subpersonalities, each with its own viewpoint and qualities. So basically, we're not just one sort of dominating mindset. We are a composition of many. And if you think about the different thoughts you have, certainly you are. You can't tell it to one sort of persona. We are comprised of many different personas. It uses family systems theory to understand how these collections of sub-personalities are organized. Dr. Schwartz is definitely still doing incredibly great work. He has seminars all the time. And I'll refer to his website a few times in this deck. It's ifs-institute.org, I believe. And go to the next slide. Get that up there for you. Yeah, .com rather. ifsinstitute.com. Basically, he is offering seminars throughout the year, but also his books are available up on that site. And definitely, if you're looking to a place to get more information on internal family systems, it's definitely the place to go. When we refer to ourself, what do we refer to? Well, there's 6 important concepts of this. The mind, as complicated as it may be, is comprised of many parts, in which it is charged of our self. The self is our center. The self is basically the collection of those parts. Everyone has a self, one that leads into our system of thoughts, our internal system. Contrary to popular belief, there are no bad parts. We only look to find the non-extreme. So basically trying to find sustainability and basically normalcy across those parts. Well, normalcy is a bad term. I would say sustainability is probably the better term. The goal is to achieve balance and harmony. A self that can be competent, secure, relaxed, and self-confident is the goal. Now, there's actually something called the 8 C's and the 5 P's, and we'll get to that in a minute or two. But those are basically the underarching premises that we try to gravitate to. A self that can listen and respond to feedback is definitely somewhere towards optimal. It's never perfect, but if we basically meld ourselves to being able to learn, but also being reactive and cognizant of what's going on, that is a very important thing. If you think about it, though, as I go back to Maine, when we're deep in the wrath of addiction and compulsion, we lose sight of that. We get blurred by many different things, whether it is alcoholism or whatever the compulsion or addiction is. In my case, alcohol, overeating, gambling. We lose sight of that. It's almost like there's fuzziness around us, and we lose sight of that sort of key hallmark. When we start taking therapy for IFS and start realizing what we're doing and taking account of that, we become closer to what we are. We are a composition of parts, and they all have their own needs. They have their own firefighters, managers, and definitely their own set of exiles. And we'll talk about what that means in 5 minutes. It sounds foreign right now, but it'll make sense in about 5-10 minutes. But that whole system works together. See? So I'm going to go back to the slide here. We can definitely listen and respond to feedback when we are better tuned towards it. Otherwise, we run amok. We ever heard the term whirling dervish? We become a whirling dervish, so to speak, because our mind is all over the place and not centered. It's not in harmony. There's no balance. So I mentioned the 3 terms just now. There are exiles, there are managers, there are firefighters. If we think about it, when we're protecting the parts of ourselves, the exiles are what we're trying to protect. The managers and the firefighters are the ones doing the protecting. Now, the managers find benevolent ways to manage. The firefighters may find malevolent ways to manage. Both of which are managing us, but they are definitely managing the exile. So, if we think about exiles, these are the parts of us that have experienced trauma and often become isolated from the rest of the system to protect the individual from feeling the pain, terror, fear, and so on of these parts. Whether it is drinking, whether it is just one letdown after another. These become the parts that are hurting, and that gets realized through therapy. If exiled, we can become increasingly extreme and desperate to be cared for and tell their story. Again, realizing that we are parts. It can leave the individual feeling fragile and vulnerable, especially when more exiles are coming out of the woodwork and not being treated. If we think about the common burdens of the exile parts. We're thinking about feelings of guilt. We're thinking about anger. We're thinking about shame, irresponsibility. We're thinking about sense of worthlessness, hopelessness, loneliness. Loneliness is a big key there, and emptiness. These are common across your exiles. And the more a part becomes exiled, the deeper the hurt becomes, the deeper things need to come out of the woodwork, as I use that phrase again, to help battle that. Basically, your protectors. As I mentioned before, your frequent burdens are fear, feeling of guilt, anger, shame, responsibility, sense of worthlessness, hopelessness, loneliness, emptiness, grief, and disappointment. These are not the best feelings in the world. But if we have a strategy to work with these things, the better we are. So then we start talking about managers. Now, there are 4 different kinds of managers. I'll get to that in a second. But these are the parts that run the day-to-day life of the individual. And as I said before, they try to keep benevolent control of every situation. You think about it as the functioning protector instead of the one that may be a bit reckless or haphazard. The relationship to protect parts and feeling from any hurt or rejection, but in the most organized way. Can do this in any number of ways through a combination of parts: striving, controlling, evaluating, caretaking, terrorizing, and so on. There are 4 different kinds of managers commonly. There's the controller, there's the perfectionist, there's the passive pessimist, and then there's the babysitter. Now, some are better than others, as you could tell by the names of these managers. The controller is the part in IFS that wants to have control over everything. Basically, the buck begins and stops with the controller, because they think that any sort of deviation from the plan is not adequate. There's very much rigidity with the way a controller will look at it, which is slightly less conforming than the perfectionist, which with the perfectionist, now the goal is perfection, no matter what. With a controller, there is some sort of allowance for a path to be generated that is not the most perfect path. And the perfectionist is the person that makes sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed, and whatnot. When we think about the passive pessimist, try saying that 5 times fast. It's the one that's not necessarily downtrodden, but will always throw up a feeling or two when things don't go the way it should, but will provide some sort of course correction, not in the most complimentary of language. And then the babysitter is the one that is just making sure everything is done without any sort of liberty for the self to take care of the situation on their own. As you can see, the managers are there to fulfill that situation for the moment. But ideally, as we work better through a certain situation where we are dealing with exile, we are becoming more and more sufficient to work through it ourselves without needing those sort of extreme managers. But there along the line that when we are dealing with something, especially in that of addiction, the managers definitely come out. I'll go back to Maine for a second. Jamie says she exiled a lot of feelings until she got sober. Almost 2 years sober soon. Congratulations, Jamie. And many new feelings are surfacing. That is important to mention, because as we work through these things, we realize that there are things that have been neglected. They have been shuffled under the rug because we used either the manager, or, as we're going to talk to in a second, something a little more nefarious than that, in that of a firefighter, to help get us a better sense of normalcy, or at least try to, in not the most cleanest of ways, try to get the train on the proverbial track. But you'll find that when you start doing this sort of therapy, a lot of things start rising to the surface. And that in itself is a very healthy situation. What you'll find in IFS sessions usually is it starts with talk therapy, but then it starts working into an exercise of identifying these things and working up with a contingency plan for all of these managers, for the different exiles that are coming out of the woodwork. Let's mention those firefighters. The firefighters are the distracting protector. So we talked before about the managing protector, or basically the protector that is organized, the controlling protector of that of a manager. When we talk about a firefighter, now we're talking about the protector that is there to distract, to move you away from what is hurting you by any sort of distraction. And more times than not, the distraction is not the greatest. There are a group of parts that react when exiles are activated to control and extinguish their feelings, hence the name firefighter. You can do this through any number of nefarious ways, including drug or alcohol use, self-mutilation, cutting, binge eating, sex binges, and a whole load of other things. Things that are not the greatest, but might be 1 degree better than the behavior that got you down the road in the first place. It's interesting to think about, but we talk about alcoholism, and I got an example in about 5 minutes that talk about how alcoholism and firefighters basically play off of that. Firefighters have the same goal as a manager, but they have different strategies. And the word I keep gravitating to is a nefarious or malevolent strategy. It's not the most sustainable strategy at all. However, what I said is it may be slightly better than the thing that got you down the road in the first place. I'll take an example that really hits home for me. When you have a situation where you are in a very empty sort of place, empty of thought, empty of feeling, empty of love, empty of whatnot. More times than not, you start gravitating to firefighters because you need to fill that with any sort of distracting sort of nuance to help you through that, whether it be overeating in the sense of, I'll use this thought for a second, I'll go to Maine for a minute. Overeating in the sense that I used to sit in a drive-thru after, late in the evening to get the 4th or 5th meal of the day. Or I was the same person that would go and drink well beyond the normal amount when I went out to dinner, or I was the one that was trying to find a chance to gamble every chance he got because there was a lot of emptiness. It doesn't make it right, but they are firefighters who are trying to put out the fire being emptiness. So when we think about the different things that are these qualities that we need to uphold to get ourselves to a better self, we talk about the 8 C's and the 5 P's, and they will work in tandem. Let's talk about the 8 C's. What we should be gravitating to is a natural curiosity, a calmness, some clarity, connection, confidence, courage, creativity, and compassion. When we find that some of those elements are gone, that brings us down to a path where we need to find managers and firefighters because we are not complete. We are not living our optimal self. There are parts of ourselves that are misaligned. We're trying to find ways to get them back on the tracks. So at the end of the day, those 8 qualities, those 8 C's of self-energy, as the slide says, are very important. it helps us become one with ourselves. But not only that, if we bring that love inside, we grow that love and that strength inside. Imagine what it can do for others. It goes back to the codependence, doesn't it? But we have to have a better handle on those 8 C's before we can do anything else. With the 8 C's, we can then get a better handle on the 5 P's, which would be presence, being in the moment, perspective, patience, persistence, and then playfulness. Presence being first and foremost, because more times than not, we have to live in the moment. We can't live in the past, and we certainly can't live in the future, right? We learn from the past, but we can't dwell upon the past. That's what I mean by that. The presence is an important quality to have, an important sort of perspective to have. You have to have a good handle on the present before you can do anything else. The perspective is just as much important, but I think in order to gain perspective, you have to have a good charge of the present. Then you can fully take a look at what is around you. From that information, being in the current moment, being in the current place, then you gain a sense of time. You gain a sense of patience. Now you're learning that, hey, if I have those other 2 pieces, I can be patient about these things. When you have those 3, then you are feeling a little more at liberty to be playful about it, in the sense that not everything is so rigid anymore. You're not so cutthroat about it. You can be playful about it. You can have a certain, a joie de vivre, if you will, without managing or firefighting out of it. And then if you have those 4 things and can maintain that, well, you're being persistent upon those things and taking care of yourself. Let's go to my story for a second. If you think about it, a lot of the thoughts that I had pushed me away from the present and had me really stuck in the past. Now, I'll talk about something my first IFS therapist talked to me about, is that I had a very bad habit of opening up all the boxes when things were wrong, when I was feeling down in the doldrums about something, which is the worst possible thing you could do. You shouldn't open up all the boxes. You open up one at a time, if at all any, to address it. But the worst thing you do is open up every single box at the same time. So having a better handle on the present gave me perspective. Now, what was my goal in 2019? Well, the first goal was to lose the weight. You go back to the board as we do in the beginning of every episode, you notice that the number of days on the diet is the largest number, followed by the number of days sober, followed by the number of days not gambling. They weren't all done at the same time, and it required me gaining perspective, but gaining a better handle on the present. The chief, and this is going to be very controversial, I'm about to say, but I'm going to throw it out there for a second. The chief addiction I had was the overeating obesity, at being over 310 pounds overweight. That is basically the reaction of me shuffling a lot of things under the rug and me using food as a coping mechanism. You guessed it, a firefighter. Once I started making an initiative to start tackling that, I noticed that the weight wasn't coming off the scale quickly. And it's because once, twice, 3 times a week I'd be drinking, but there was a period of time leading up to May 30th of 2019 where I was drinking every day. And this was in a situation where I was trying to eat everything calorically to work myself through this, using apps like Lose It and whatnot to figure out exactly how many calories I can have in a given day. But I was still drinking. And when things got really rough, I was drinking more. As I mentioned on the show previously, there was a bottle of bourbon next to the coffee maker. That's not really something that is taking care of the situation, but that was a firefighter in its fullest effect, and it wasn't being taken care of. the moment I hit that bottom, the moment that last day I was drinking on May 30th of 2019, things started to become better over time. But I had to gain that perspective of what I was doing to myself and realizing that the two are intertwined. I was still gambling though, right? So then working that into 2020 and realizing, oh, well, here I am in a situation going through a life change of a separation. I'm still gambling. Oh, here's a piece of registered mail. So there's yet another firefighter that had to be addressed. And that required more reflection, more understanding of what I was doing to myself. In all of this, there's patience in the sense that during all of that, I was very committed to the diet program I had committed to. I was very committed to the sobriety. Haven't had a drink since May 30th, 2019. Very committed to not gambling anymore for a couple of reasons. One, not healthy for me mentally or physically. Second of all, not terribly a great financial idea in the eyes of many different organizations. The three running together also made me realize that I was really codependent. That when I was morbidly obese, class 4 morbidly obese, there are very few things I was able to do for myself. So I became very codependent. And not only me requiring the codependent, but me also offering up codependence and things that I should not be offering. It went both ways. So the three definitely hold hand in hand. When I started getting better about myself, started noticing the massive weight loss, the fact that sobriety actually feels quite great if you ask me, and the fact that I don't feel tied to a casino or a video poker machine. There's a great level of care, and I could be playful about it. I could joke about it because I know it's not going to affect me. But there again, it takes time and it takes work. When you have all those things and you're committed to those things and you're persistent in those things and also preaching it, depending on what sort of recovery community you're a part of, you have the 5 Ps to a better self. I'll bring back that graphic one more time. Presence, perspective, patience, playfulness, persistence. And that required the 8 Cs to be understood. The curiosity, the calmness, the clarity, the connection, the confidence, the courage, the creativity, and the compassion. We must never lose sight of the compassion. It is a very important thing. And I say that because we are in 2022, and with the amount of vitriol that's going on in this world right now, we need to be compassionate individuals. Let me go to Maine. A couple comments popped up. Jamie says, I thought, yeah, I quit drinking. I fixed my addiction. And then I realized almost 2 years later, I have a food addiction and it's bigger than my alcoholism. She continues on to say, and wiggling my way out of being a codependent with a disorganized attachment style. Fun stuff, haha. The fact that the light bulb went off and the fact that you're seeing this is the most important thing. The fact that you have a plan around it, or a plan through it, or what have you. It takes time, but keep at it. And you know how I feel. I'm very proud of you. We are all in this together for sure. One of the important components of taking care of oneself, well, I would say 3 actually, is the meditation piece to try to get that sort of centralization place, that period of calm, whether it's 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 20 minutes. We talk about the importance of therapy and doing things like internal family systems or what have you. But the other piece of this is journaling. We have to be clear with our feelings. We have to be clear with that. When something is affecting us, it is most important for us to take note. Even if the person that's seeing that note is just us. If we keep track of that, as the most important thing we can do. So I'm going to reprise a slide I showed back in October, but this is important. Why do we journal? Well, there are 5 reasons. 1, we get a chance to strengthen our emotional function. If we are clear with our feelings, we are definitely moving ourselves to the 5 P's that we talked about just now. We're reducing stress. We're not needing to gravitate to the firefighters and managers we were talking about. Our immune function subsequently becomes better because we're not stressed. And we talked about the sort of correlation between stress and immunity and immune function. Our memory becomes sharper because we're keeping track of everything, we're noticing everything, we're present in everything. And then it is a mood booster because we can then look back at times and just observe. We don't dwell upon it, but we observe. It's a mood booster because we realize that the things that are going on around us, but the things we're actually doing. That's why we journal. I use an application called Day One. Been using it religiously the last 3 years, and it's really helped me. In Day One, I will put together random thoughts, random captions, random what have you. But I try to take care of that journal every day, even if I'm just answering towards a prompt. It's important. It allows the mind to be free-flowing of perspective, free-flowing of just being a chance to be creative, but also observant. Journaling is very important, and you'll talk to any therapist, and they will tell you how important the journaling story is. Go back to Maine for 1 second. Jamie says, oh, exactly. It's a blessing. I am aware. It's just some days it's exhausting, but I'm grateful. Proud of you too, JV. Thank you. Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that a lot. And I appreciate you. And we have Elo on YouTube who says, hello, 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 Elo. And I say, you say goodbye. I say Elo, Elo, Elo. Hope you're having a great evening. So you may ask yourself, why should I journal? Wrong graphic. Wrong graphic. Going the other way. And now the theme music is working. Go figure. Why should I journal? At bare minimum, let it be a brain drain. Get your thoughts out. Get it out on paper. Get it out in your journal. The only way you know is by writing in your journal. There's no set format, no set tone, even if it is to expel the whiny stuff. Nothing should be off limits. As euphoric or as traumatic the experience is, we should journal about it. And writing can be the practice that gets us closer to healing. This is out of a New York Times article last year. What's all this about journaling? Definitely a good article if you get a chance to read it. So much so that I use Day One in my journal to write poetry. And the last time we had this talk back in October, I had a poem. This is a different poem that I wrote in November. And I want to share it with you. It's called One Day. One day is done, for another one is beginning. One thought is gone, as new ones start ruminating. One old habit borns a healthy other, the lessons of old are learned. One path of many becomes real. The ashes of manifest hath burned. One sunny day turns rainy. One bad episode turns grainy. One rainy day becomes into amazing wonder. Of all these thoughts hath continuously ponder. The work has just begun. One list remains a bountiful ton. As I start to begin to run, one's wallow is never any fun. The story grows and gets told to one, to many, and to all, invigorated, becoming better than ever, and yet with one, plenty to learn and to rise tall. It's interesting what journaling can do. when you start thinking about writing things in verse in addition to prose, it's really freeing on what you can actually write. That poem is definitely something I have gravitated to. And Jamie says, still a great entry. Yeah, it is about 6 months old now, but yeah, it's one of my favorites for sure. I never lose sight of the importance of becoming one with my feelings, one with my journey. And the way to do that is by journaling. Another way I do that is continuing this venture forward and talking to all of you about the different aspects of this journey, the different things I've noticed, the different things that have been resonant to me. I must conclude the way I began in the sense that I am not a therapist. I've gone for plenty of internal family systems therapy. So, if you're looking for a place to go as far as getting therapy with respect to internal family systems or any kind of therapy, psychologytoday.com is a great place to find psychiatrists and therapists in your area. Also, you can contact SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, at 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-4357. It's a phone number that is available 24/7, 365. And if you're feeling suicidal crisis, you can contact the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. Or you can go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org. You can also text the word HOME to 741-741. It's important to remind you of these things because, again, the best therapy you can get is someone who is a psychologist or a therapist or what have you. There are great sources out there that can help you, but spending time getting your feelings out and being adamant and transparent about these things is the best thing you could possibly do. And it's something that has helped me greatly. Let's talk about next week. Next week is a very important week. Tuesday, we're going to basically talk about two topics. One, I'm going to basically talk about what the next round of O service is going to look like, because 1 week from today, I will be going back to the University of Pennsylvania for my 4th infusion of O service. So my 3rd dose. Remember, the first 2 were half doses. My 4th round of O service, 1 week from today. And it has been a medication that has basically saved my life, because here was something that was just a demyelinating symptom, demyelinating disease. It wasn't being taken care of. And then we get to the end of 2020, and it was something that had to be certainly taken care of. And I am very thankful for the incredible doctors at the University of Pennsylvania that have helped me through this. So 1 week from today, I will be back at UPenn to do exactly that. But on the Tuesday night show, we're going to talk about what O service actually is, what it has done for me, and moreover, what it can do for other people who have demyelination and or multiple sclerosis. That's the first half of the show. The second half of the show will be the fact that I will be 2 years past not gambling anymore. It'll be my 2-year chip day for not gambling. So we're going to talk about both of those things on the Tuesday night episode. And then Thursday, we have a little bit of a treat. Truth be told, I will not have any energy to do a show next Thursday. But there will be a show, because there will be a takeover. For one night and one night only, there will be a special guest co-host. I won't tell you who, but the person is a friend of the show and will be doing a topic 1 week from tonight, and we'll tell you more about what that topic is and who the co-host is. It may be a secret. We may keep it a secret till next Thursday night. But nevertheless, next Thursday, you'll see in the credits, it says the journey continues with special co-host. We'll tell you more about it as we get closer to next Thursday. And then Tomorrow and next Friday, we will continue to have VF Talks, where we have a conversation about anything and everything with Rich Haas. Wow. I see Rich Vibes, and I say Rich. I'm combining names now. Matt Haas, Paul Burke, sometimes Rich Vibes, sometimes. And I think if Rich wanted to change his, well, that'd be fine. But Matt Haas, Paul Burke, and all of you, the venture community, it is a fun time. I enjoy the Friday night shows at 6:30. It is a good time indeed. So the 2 episodes, the episode on the Oservis and the 2 years not gambling will be Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. The special guest host on a topic to be determined, which we'll tell you more about in the coming days, will be next Thursday night, 8 p.m. 5 Pacific. And then VF Talks will be tomorrow and next Friday at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific. And now I'll bring up comments that are ribbing me on a name slip. Here goes nothing. Here's Rich Vibes. I see the name and I get my names twisted. Rich, how are you doing this late evening, early morning? Hope you're doing well, Rich. Jamie says, ooh, suspension. And then Jamie says, Rich Haas, Matt Vibes. Yeah, it's all combined. And then Rich is correcting. He says, no, Dr. Yellow, Rich Haas. There you go. Well, hey, if you take that up with Matt, or, why am I even going there? I've been really good with names over these last 2 years. And for the first time, and I'm sure people are going to bring up clips now of where I screwed up names. I say that now, but you think about it, and whatever. Matt Haas, Paul Burke, and all of you, tomorrow night, 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific on VF Talks. But until next time, I'm going to say the same thing I say at the end of every Venture Forward in VF Talks. Stay safe, stay sane, stay strong, stay sober. You're worth it. We'll see you tomorrow night at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific for VF Talks with Matt Haas, Paul Burke, and all of you. Have a wonderful evening. Take care of yourselves. I love you all. And fly, be free.